is the first image that comes into your head when someone mentions the gay community? Chances are you picture same-sex couples dancing in a smoky, dark bar. While it is true that gay bars have played a major role in the social lives of many lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender individuals, gay bars alone do not cause the higher rates of substance abuse in this population. The real story is much more complicated. This video explores some of the reasons why LGBT people may develop addictions to alcohol, drugs, or tobacco, and examines some of the common treatment issues.
In terms of my sexuality and substance abuse, I feel like I kind of came into the whole thing doomed. You know, I don't want to say it's a stereotype, but when you go to a gay bar, there are people there that are doing drugs, and there are people there that are just getting extremely wasted, and there are people there that do this every night. And when you make friends with them, the more people you know that do it, the normalizing effect it has on that.
If I had to say whether gay and lesbian issues had anything to do with my use of drugs and alcohol, I would say yes, probably. What set me apart, what kind of left me feeling isolated and alone, was that difference, which I didn't have words for at the time. And I think when I had the freedom that college allows young people, I self-medicated. That was how I dealt with my depression. That was how I dealt with my confusion. One thing the women's movement helped me with was my being clear about my sexual orientation, because we were able to talk about a whole variety of issues related to gender and sexuality and sexual orientation. And in some ways, that political consciousness saved my life. And then in other ways, it also gave me a whole group to drink and drug with.
And what happens eventually is your drinking and drugging gets to be too much, and then yourself, who you are inside, gets to be too much. And eventually you feel like you live in a lie, because you're really not who you are. You're trying to pretend you're somebody you're not.
I went into treatment, but treatment was the first issue. The first issue that I had was I came back into this country, and all my experience was, how do I identify? Straight, gay, bisexual, what am I, Native American, other, African American? Suddenly everything was in boxes, where in Europe, coming straight from high school into a whole different system, there was no classification, identification of who you are, what you identify. There was none of that. I'm in love with the woman. So I'm looked at as being lesbian. I'm like, what the hell is lesbian? What does that mean? I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means, and I don't even like the word.
I came out my junior year, not really by choice so much as I ended up telling one friend who ended up telling two more, and then it was kind of like small town gossip. Everyone knew before my parents knew. So then it was kind of, for a couple of months, I was just like, when are they going to find out and ask me, or should I tell them first? And then I ended up telling them my senior year. After I went to a summer camp, and after that I kind of, I met different people. I met a variety of people. I met other gay people. So it kind of like created a base community that allowed me to be able to come out to my parents, and then if they were to disown me, I could kind of move on to another family, so to speak.
It's been a great gift to me. It took me a while to understand it as gift, because everybody was telling me it's wrong, it's bad, and everyone was telling me that without ever saying that. It was how others are treated, how others are perceived. Someone asked Truman Capote, what is a faggot? And he said, after thinking a moment, a faggot is a homosexual gentleman who has just left the room.
I knew when I went to school, I used to always play with my cousin. She was a female. But then when I went to kindergarten, they separated me because my name was Robert and I looked like a boy. So girls played over here and boys played over here. I didn't like that. My family didn't like me playing with dolls anymore and didn't like me playing dress up and stuff like that. They thought that was weird and all that, and I would get smacked on the butt if I would continue to do that. So through fear of getting hurt, I stopped doing it and kind of put it away in my mind, and every time Halloween came, I always dressed as a girl. That was my way of expressing myself. I got to do it once a year.
I thought it was a real character defect. I thought it was something that I really needed to be, you know, fixed. And I even, when I was younger, I thought, well, if I just had, you know, I even got married. And I thought, well, you know, if I just have a female that I can be with and have sex with, then I won't have these feelings anymore. Well, no, didn't work that way. And it actually did get to the point towards the end where I would date women, but I wouldn't have sex with women because it wasn't what I wanted to do. And of course, that actually added to a lot of stress, and I was using a tremendous amount of coke at that time and drinking very heavily at that time.
There are a number of obstacles to studying substance abuse in LGBT populations. First, both are hidden populations. Both substance abuse and minority sexual and gender identities are stigmatized identities in our society. Second, most of the research that has been done has focused on urban populations, often in only one city. Finally, the focus of most research has been on what and how much LGBT people use, not on why they use or what experiences with treatment they have had. Keeping these problems in mind, let's see what the research has to say about substance use patterns. Regarding alcohol use, compared to data from the general population, LGBT people are less likely to be abstainers, have about the same rate of current heavy drinking, are less likely to show declines in drinking with age, and are about twice as likely to report past alcohol problems and to report being in recovery. Studies have found that 15 to 25% report being in recovery or having past problems with alcohol. For illicit drug use, compared to data from the general population, LGBT people have about the same rates of current recreational use of most drugs, have a higher lifetime rate of most drugs. Bisexual women report more drug use than lesbians. Gay and bisexual men and transgender sex workers have higher rates of certain drugs, including stimulants and club drugs used for sexual enhancement. Regarding smoking, compared to data from the general population, LGBT people have higher rates of lifetime and current smoking. About 30% are current smokers. Smoking is linked to alcohol use and to recovery from alcohol drug abuse. People in recovery are much more likely to smoke than people who have not had alcohol or drug problems.
Probably alcohol when I was around 15, and then started smoking pot when I was 17, and moved on to cocaine when I was 18, which actually ended up being my drug of choice, was cocaine. Also got involved in the illegal drug trade about the same time, and continued to do that for approximately 15 to 18 years, and then decided to go back to college.
I started using when I was 17 years old, alcohol, and then I started smoking pot, and I started messing around with speed and taking cross tops and the diet pills, and then I had quit using when I got married and became pregnant, and started using meth, and by snorting it, and it progressed into smoking, and that's when I became very addicted to the meth, and used meth for the last 14 years. I didn't stop until I was sentenced to prison, and that's when I was able to quit. I had to be incarcerated in order to quit.
Just before my 18th birthday, I started occasionally having beer at a little pizza parlor in our hometown, and with friends. And I discovered that that made a big difference in how I felt in social interactions. And I have a mild form of cerebral palsy, so I always have some tightness in my right side, particularly in my legs, right leg, and that sort of eased off, and it was like relaxing, but in all sorts of ways. I drank from the time I was 18 until about age 33, and when I was asked to leave the seminary was the big change for me. That came as such a shock.
And everyone is so nonchalant about marijuana. And it's an attitude that you just kind of pick up. And so, you know, that is the one thing that I don't mind doing. If it keeps me at home for an evening, and I watch TV and I laugh and I have a great time with my friends, for me, it's hard for me to see any evil in that, especially if it keeps me out of the bar. I'm like, this stuff's great. But then again, it's an evening wasted where I don't do my homework, and then I go to bed early, because once my mom was like, why do you have to get drunk when you drink? And I'm like, well, what's the point of drinking? I don't drink because I'm thirsty or I need to be hydrated, you know? I drink for that purpose, to become intoxicated. That's why anyone drinks, in my eyes, in our culture.
Something was being passed around, and I went ahead and took a hit of it. And in that moment that I took a hit of it, it was, I felt like I was walking on clouds, like suddenly light and relaxed, and I didn't care what anyone had to say. Suddenly whatever they said was fine, and I just was so relaxed that I didn't suddenly, my mind or my judgment or my separation from other didn't occur at that time. So I started feeling comfortable, and I was like, what is that, you know? And later I found out it was laced with opium. The heroin in that village was just, it's called China White, was really quite incredible, and I tried it. And that was the drug of choice that I ended up getting addicted to.
And I was like very much self-medicating. I was on some antidepressants, but they weren't really working, and I was definitely using alcohol to get through it. So then I was started being suicidal, so I had to, you know, leave school.
And I guess I started drinking and stuff, I guess about 16. God, when we got divorced, I was drinking probably about 3 6-packs and probably a quart of wine a day. And I was driving a truck at the time. I was a truck driver. Picture this.
And this was probably my lowest point, and that was when I was using a lot of crystal at the time. I mean, it started out as Coke, but when my friend couldn't get Coke, he gave me crystal, and that was fine with me. I thought that was the greatest stuff around because I could stay slim and I could study. My concentration was incredible, and I had the cleanest house that ever was. I was driving around with a friend of mine, and we had crystal, and she had some other dope, and she wanted to put it in her arm with a needle, and I was very close to doing it that night, and somehow I didn't do it that night, but I will never forget that I was ready to.
When you look at what lesbians are using in terms of drugs, basically you see, what I see in my treatment program are Caucasian women are usually presenting with alcohol problems, and generally African American women present with crack cocaine problems, and it's almost become more of a socioeconomic type of influence on what drugs are being used. And also, whether or not you're really into kind of like a club scene, going to raves, that's where you see women then having issues with ecstasy, GHB, but not nearly like the the gay male community. You know, in the gay male community, methamphetamine dependence is rampant.
There is some data that demonstrates the additive effects of minority stress. This figure shows moderate and heavy drinking rates in racial ethnic minority women, comparing lesbians to heterosexual women. African American lesbians and heterosexual women in this sample were equally likely to drink, but notice how much a lesbian identity increases the risk for heavier drinking in Hispanic and Asian American women. The same pattern holds for smoking. Lesbians of all three racial ethnic minority groups were more likely to smoke than their heterosexual counterparts. The more minority identities an individual has, the greater their daily level of stress. In the general population, heavy drinking declines significantly between ages 20 and 30 as an individual gets married, has children, and settles into a career. However, drinking declines less significantly in the LGBT population. This table shows rates of alcohol problems by age group. Notice there is no difference between LGBT people and heterosexuals from age 18 to 30, but significant differences at the older age groups. There are fewer social institutions that discourage substance use, such as marriage, fewer social outlets, such as religious community activities and family events, to replace bars or private parties, less validation of the legitimacy of relationships, and higher levels of daily stress for LGBT people.
When drinking, I would use other drugs as well. Once I got to that place, I used any drugs and alcohol that were available, and that's the problem with that kind of environment, with the bar as a social gathering place, with the bar as a community gathering place. That's what you do there. You drink and you use.
Like, where do gay people go that isn't at the gay bar? And, you know, I witnessed a GLBT meeting, and I was just like, who are these people? Why have I never seen them before? And, you know, why are they not any fun? And I kind of have a soft spot in my heart for the gay bar. I'm like, the gay bar has made me the person I am today. I've met a lot of my friends through there. I've learned a lot of things for the first time there. You know, I go there, it's kind of like my Cheers. Everyone knows me, and it's, you know, a friendly place.
Why do LGBT people have slightly higher rates of use and abuse? Homophobia, negative stigma in society, minority stress, dealing with harassment, social rejection, discrimination, threat of, or actual violence on a daily basis. This is compounded for those with multiple minority identities. Internalized homophobia, a sense of shame, guilt, or distress about one's sexuality that comes from believing negative stereotypes. The prominence of gay bars as one of the few social outlets. Targeted advertising by alcohol and tobacco manufacturers. Advertisers have developed knowledge about culturally specific messages and have very successfully marketed their products to minority populations. Do these ads have power? For a group that has been stigmatized, being recognized and validated in the media is powerful. Finally, LGBT people may develop substance use disorders for all the same reasons as heterosexual people: childhood abuse experiences, dysfunctional families, family history, trauma and loss, depression, poverty, and so on.
With a little bit of alcohol, I found that I could talk to just about anybody in ways that I had never been able to, or had been terrified, but sometimes I could get myself to talk at a gathering. But I was very shy and avoided those kinds of things. It gave me that means to relax a little bit and be a little bit more myself. Ultimately, alcohol and my sexuality mixed very poorly, and I got into a considerable amount of trouble with it, particularly because I was studying at the time at a seminary.
Where I had self-medicated previously to deal with depression and confusion and inability to talk about those issues, the women's movement, the openness and the ability to talk about it turned it into a celebration. So if it wasn't one thing, it was another. There are many reasons to drink and use, and the primary one, you know, who knows?
My little guy let a social worker in the house, and I came walking down the hall and dressed as Natalie, and she just screamed running out of the house, "Ah! Oh, crazy person, you're weird, you're weird." So she went and got a sheriff, and the sheriff came back and took my kids, and they all called me sick, and I was devastated, of course, and I lost my job because they called my job and told my job I was dressing and stuff like that, so they thought I was crazy, and you know, I didn't know what to do. I was kind of lost, and of course the only thing I know what to do when I'm hurting is go get drunk. So I went and got drunk at the bar in that town of 110 people. Of course everybody knows everybody, and nobody would talk to me. And that evening when I left the bar, as I was walking out, somebody called my name. And I turned around, and I got hit with a baseball bat, of course, in the head, and I got knocked unconscious. And they continued to beat me as I was unconscious.
There are two common views in the substance abuse treatment field. One view is that all substance abusers share common issues that need to be addressed in treatment and/or self-help groups. Therefore, specialized services are not necessary for any subgroup of the population. This view is common in most 12-step self-help groups, such as Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, and in many specialized treatment programs. The second view is that personal identities such as age, gender, race, ethnicity, and sexual orientation are important considerations in treatment, and that staff and programs must be culturally sensitive to the different issues in each group. Programs or individuals that subscribe to this view are more likely to provide culturally specific programming or services. There are a handful of LGBT-specific treatment programs in the U.S. Both viewpoints are true to some extent. Many LGBT people start using substances or develop problems with substances for the same reasons as many heterosexual people. However, even when the underlying reasons are the same, the experience of living in a homophobic, biphobic, transphobic, and sex-negative culture colors our experiences. Awareness of these issues is necessary for treatment to be effective.
With gay people, we have adversaries. There's no doubt. All you have to do is read the newspaper. There are people that want us dead.
While I was in treatment, I felt that I was the token queer. I felt that I was the only one there in treatment, and that I was the target of any kind of activity going on. I was the one that was called into the counselor's office and questioned. It was assumed that when I would talk to another female that I was sexually interested in that female. When new females would come into the program, one especially that I was friends with, the counselors automatically assumed that I was in a relationship with this person, which I wasn't. I was just her friend. I felt that all eyes were on me at all times, and that my behavior was being watched.
I guess I struggled for 8 or 10 years, resistive to going to treatment, resistive to going to Alcoholics Anonymous, which is something that works for a lot of people, for a variety of reasons. But I tried therapy, I tried those support groups, which many of my friends were involved in, and either I wasn't ready, probably both, or that just didn't work for me.
My treatment program, was great in a lot of ways. I definitely felt going into it, though, that I kind of stuck out, in some ways, in terms of being queer, or being having a gender identity that wasn't totally normative, and of course that was a way for me to be fuck this, I'm not doing it. It was kind of a struggle to be queer and in that recovery program, because not because of the counselors. I mean, the counselors were pretty great, definitely, was really like heteronormative, the whole thing, in terms of what I mean by that, I guess, would just be like you have to talk about relationships, and always it's like, you know, if you're a dude, they're gonna be like talking about like your girlfriend or like vice versa. And that's just the way the world is. It's a little bit alienating, I suppose, when you're trying to like sober up and you kind of feel like you have this part of you that's like not being totally recognized. I mean, and I guess like gender and like, you know, who you sleep with and stuff is important in those contexts, I think, like in recovery and in treatment programs, because you have to like deal with every part of your life. You have to deal with like, well, you have to deal with like your past relationships, you have to deal with like your family, everything.
I think some of the main barriers to treatment, two major ones that stand out in my mind, is lack of representation in staff of LGBT personnel and environment, like a gay-friendly environment, something that you feel when you walk in through the doors.
Well, I think as far as what counselors should know is you can't always pick the gay person out of the crowd. You just don't know. You know, especially during that period of time, I really tried to put off the kind of quote good old boy type of a front, and was, you know, would sit down with anybody and try to come off as one of the guys, and I didn't. To me, I just didn't see myself as having any type of any of the I guess the stereotypical gay mannerisms that a lot of people would look for. And actually, if anybody would have been picking that out, they would have really had to have been doing their homework. Counselors to just be aware of that maybe the person that they think is the straightest person on the planet might not be.
What impact do staff attitudes have on the recovery of LGBT people? Some research has shown that the most powerful component of treatment is the degree of warmth and empathy of treatment staff. The relationship between the client and the treatment professional is the key to successful treatment. Unfortunately, a number of individuals in the U.S. have negative or ambivalent attitudes about LGBT people that may affect the client-counselor relationship. In one study, a significant number of substance abuse counselors had negative or ambivalent attitudes about LGBT people. By sexual identity group, 29% were negative or ambivalent about lesbians, 36% about gay men, 47% about bisexual people, and 56% about transgender people. In this same study, counselors offered some ideas about the barriers to treatment that LGBT people might encounter. The two most common barriers were prejudice and discrimination from within the treatment system, including staff, other clients, mentors, and AA/NA members, and lack of acceptance or not fitting into the treatment climate, citing that staff and other clients would not understand LGBT people's issues. Cultural sensitivity for all of the social identities of the client.
And the whole word of God, I came from Buddhist training. I started really becoming a Buddhist, you know, and I didn't identify with God whatsoever at that time, even though in my own lineage I could identify it. But as a young adult, I didn't come into relationship with God. I came into relationship as becoming a supreme beingness, not a relationship with a supreme being. And so my outlook was somewhat different than that. So I couldn't, the word powerless, higher power just triggered me. Didn't work for me at all. Higher power to whom? To what? You know, and the majority of the people at these meetings were all white. I didn't identify with any of them, you know, so I just felt like this is Christian, white, and I didn't fit in.
One of the things that happened in treatment was that they were like talking about how this is like a spiritual experience or whatever. And I was like, hell no. Hell no. Your guys' God hate me and like want me to go to hell. I've heard you say that. And I don't want to listen to you guys talking about God. I don't want to hear some counselors telling me that I need to like think about God when like, first of all, I am like queer, and secondly, have politics that are like not conducive at all to Christianity, and that's what, in my opinion, they meant when they were talking about God.
One thing that's really important with respect to substance abuse counselors is there's a huge issue for me around religion, and I feel that it's important to, yes, acknowledge that spirituality is a critical issue in not just getting clean, but maintaining sobriety. And I encourage all people to access whatever form of spirituality that holds meaning for them. But one thing that I've witnessed a lot is that substance abuse counselors bring their own experience into the treatment arena, and often their own religion. And I've certainly seen negative forms of impact that has had on individuals. For example, one substance abuse counselor told one of our gay-identified male clients that the gay client was asking him, well, so what does your religion think about being gay? And the counselor responded, well, that you won't go to heaven. You know, it's an unnatural state of being, and that you won't go to heaven. And you know that this client worked very, very hard on becoming heterosexual and moved into this real unnatural situation, got involved with a woman in the program, ended up relapsing and out on the street for months and months and months. Religion is something you do not discuss in program. Okay, you support people through their own religion. You can help bring them to their own gateway, but not to bring your own experience, because what works for you is not going to necessarily work for anybody else. It also comes across as being very biased and judgmental.
I know with my own group, it is very hard to walk in as a Native American person into an AA meeting, and suddenly, you know, our culture is very rich in tradition. And we have ceremonies and rites and passages and medicine people to help us, and as well as a community to help us through our issue, whatever it is. And so for Native Americans to, you know, for Native people to go into an AA and suddenly feel, if they're not Christian, if they haven't assimilated to Christianity, it's really hard to like suddenly drop everything and start taking on a practice of something else. And it's actually very confusing to have to translate the language to what works for you, for many people. And who wants to do that when your own culture is rich with its own stuffs?
Is one common thing that I've seen amongst staff is that when you are dealing with women of color, when they are dealing with women of color, when a woman of color is outspoken and clear and empowered, they're immediately identified as threatening and often labeled as borderline. And I found it really interesting because in my personal dealings with women of color, I have not seen them in the same light. And of course, staff will then say to me, well, of course they're going to relate differently to you because you're a doctor. Being in an empowered position, and when I am passionate about a topic and can back it with medical information, I am also labeled as threatening, angry, when I'm not, when I'm just showing my feelings. And people of color are more expressive with their feelings. We move our hands. You know, it's not a violent act. We might show more expression. I've also seen male people of color, staff members, being labeled in a similar fashion. So there's a whole difference in communication, a whole different style that that creates, I think, difficulties in treatment, and it also, I feel, results in misdiagnoses and mismanagement of cases. Another means by which African Americans maintain the recovery is through church. But Where difficulty lies is LGBTs accessing their church. It's a very difficult culture in general to not only come out in, but to basically, state that you're transgender. It's really difficult. So most of the African Americans I've worked with actually have been disowned by their families or have moved far away from their families so that they can live a lifestyle they don't really have. And it's unfortunate because it breaks kind of the essence of that culture. Family is such a big issue in the African American culture. So it's very sad to see that they've had to move many miles away from their families in order to live their truth.
The counselors in this study were unclear as to whether LGBT people should disclose their identities. One counselor said, "I guess I don't understand why they need to tell. Heterosexual people don't." However, another counselor noted, "Their secret exists in a format where being open and honest is highly valued."
And that's what treatment centers do a lot, is they don't let people that are of that community express themselves as gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender because it's taking them off their focus of their drug of choice. Bull crap. That isn't the case. You need to talk about those issues, because if you don't talk about those issues, you're going to have problems when you go out there because there's no other support out there.
But I would never talk in certainties because I didn't want to admit this to anybody because, heaven forbid, I certainly did not want to go down and print anywhere. I didn't want to be in any file, or somebody, just that sense of impending doom, oh my God, I'm gay. I think lots of times even counselors are afraid to talk about this issue. They don't want to bring it up, especially if you're sitting in a whole room. Lots of times, if you look at the people, lots of times that end up in treatment, you're sitting there maybe with a bunch of people that are in the construction world or something like that, a bunch of, good old boys, per se. And the last thing you want to do is start bringing up issues about gay rights or gays, period, or gay emotions or anything to do with gays. It's just almost taboo even in treatment sometimes, felt like. And even though I had a gay counselor at one time, I mean at that point I was still so locked up that I wouldn't have discussed it for anything.
LGBT individuals report a wide variation in experiences with recovery, from recovering with no help at all to attending self-help groups such as AA to entering specialized substance abuse treatment programs. As you can see, most of these experiences were positive and facilitated recovery.
Being honest about my sexuality and accepting myself, for me, I no longer feel that I need to use drugs or alcohol to be myself, and looking back, I did never need that.
Even though I didn't really think I needed to quit drinking, I didn't think I needed to deal with my substance abuse because it didn't seem to be, to me it just wasn't really that big of a deal. But I knew I was miserable and that my life was totally hellish. I've been sober since then, so 9 months actually tomorrow, and things have gotten a lot better. I was really scared because I didn't think that I would ever be able to find any cool kids or whatever that that didn't use and drink for fun. But I did. I just have some great friends.
So my impression of being transgendered or I didn't even know what it was back then, was it's okay to do it as long as I don't say anything and I don't get caught. And that's what I did for the rest of my life until I hit 40 and I couldn't do it anymore. I had to do something, so I sobered up. The sad thing is I was afraid to come out in treatment. I really was, because it didn't seem safe. I mean, here I am sitting there in treatment, and all these people around me are bashing gay people. So I don't even know if there was a gay person there. And you know what I did? I turned around and would do the same thing. I would say, yeah, oh, those friggin' gay people. And I would be just like them. But yet inside I'm transgendered. And in their eyes, if they would have seen me, they would think I was a gay man because I liked men. And in that term, maybe, yes, I was a gay man at the time. But to tell them that, oh my God, that would have been devastating to me. My treatment would have been ruined.
What I did was, an important component of that treatment program was going out every night to AA meetings, gay and lesbian AA meetings. That was, oh, I can't tell you the value of that. That was like an embrace. It was, I was with my people, and we were doing the right thing, choosing health and recovery, and it was incredible. Yeah, it was exceptional.
My substance abuse counselor was actually gay, and I feel like that is one and probably the only reason that I took to the counseling, the program, as well as I did, that I actually gave it some credit and I actually forced some effort to, you know, change. And I think the reason is because he was very open with me about his past experiences. Yes, he's had an OWI. Yes, he's done this drug or that drug, or he's done these things. And, you know, that creates an environment where you can relate to your counselor, but then you can also see the person they are today. So it gives you hope as well. It's like, it's not like I'm condemned now to forever be this, you know, bar junkie that has to go to the bar to try and meet someone.
I didn't know that. I just knew that I didn't want to go home. Oh, by the way, I've been having relationships with women, and I'm a heroin addict, and this is my welcome back. I haven't seen my family since I was 17, so suddenly I'm coming home, and in such a way is something I was pretty devastated by.
You cannot be a homosexual and be an alcoholic and live.
I think then you couple that with the withdrawal effect from some of those drugs, which is heavy depression can be, especially if you're coming down from a stimulant. The depression can just be living hell, and then you center that into the whole sexuality. It can really make somebody feel like they have absolutely no self-esteem whatsoever, feel very bad, I think, and possibly even maybe add to possible attempts of self-harm, things of that nature.
Some of the challenges that treatment professionals working with LGBT clients will face in planning for discharge or preventing relapse will include finding clean and sober or safer social outlets, finding a non-using or non-abusing peer group, addressing internalized homophobia as a relapse risk factor, finding inclusive and accepting recovery support groups. For those clients who use stimulant drugs as sexual enhancers, considering sex as a relapse risk factor. Counselors need to be comfortable talking candidly about sex with all of their clients, but particularly with this group.
My first sexual experience happened when I was intoxicated. And I feel like that made it easier for myself, my internal homophobia, the fact that I could still change this, and, you know, the fact that the person I had that with was intoxicated too, and we were both young and 16 and in high school, and, you know, we could justify it to ourselves that we were just drunk.
It's amazing how many guys you can have follow you around if you have a pocket full of cocaine.
Sex and drugs. It was a big problem for me, I know. And I've had countless one-night stands. And the sad thing is I spent an entire year without having a good sexual relationship or anything that was outside of alcohol. I have not been affectionate with someone but maybe twice outside of being completely intoxicated. I feel like being gay, I have a greater excuse to be more sexually active. I think like it's just kind of part of our culture. Gay men are promiscuous. And I kind of adopted that early on, and I've spent most of the past 2 years being pretty promiscuous but not making any satisfying relationships. And for me, sex has lost so much of its appeal, and that's really sad. It's just like a part of inside of me just died.
I remember taking this very nice guy home, and he wasn't drinking either. And it was the first time I'd invited somebody to come home, have a coffee or something to drink, and with some hope of romance. And I swear I had no idea, sober, how to get him from that chair into that bedroom. I mean, always before, the alcohol had just, especially, you know, if the other person's about the same condition, it just sort of can flow, and nothing was flowing.
Well, first of all, I think that gay male sexuality is judged in and of itself. I have to say that, just even free of drugs. And what I see is it's kind of like on a spectrum, male sexuality, and gay males have the opportunity to be just as sexual as men wish to be because they have consenting partners, other men. Really what sets limits and boundaries on heterosexual male sexuality is women setting limits and boundaries on them. So I often see gay male sexuality as, you know, it's just like the ultimate, the way that they wish to express themselves sexually. That's immediately labeled by many as hypersexual and sexual addiction. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I feel that if the individual presents to you and identifies it as a problem, and that they find that they're repeatedly placing themselves in sexually dangerous situations, and it carries a lot of negative consequences, then there's an issue there. Bring methamphetamine into it, and I think it just takes it to a higher level. And it's primarily because when you start initially using methamphetamines, it enables men to maintain erections longer and have far more intimate, what they describe as intimate sex. You know, they have the feelings of love then. I mean, when you look at all the neurotransmitters that are triggered by methamphetamine use, it's like this real elated type of experience, and mixing it with sex. So the two then go hand in hand. I mean, gay men start having difficulty having sex without the drug, and one kind of becomes a cycle, and one feeds into the other. And so you really start seeing a concomitant methamphetamine dependence and a sex dependence that's developing because of the loss of control over both, that become very difficult to separate. And I think that a lot of programs are overlooking something in that, because often they will split the methamphetamine dependence away from what's going on with the individual sexually, and you really need to identify both in order to kind of break the cycle.
For a subset of LGBT people, HIV/AIDS and other serious health problems may complicate treatment. Addressing smoking at the same time as alcohol and/or other drug use. More recovering substance abusers die from tobacco-related causes than any other reason. Smoking is a relapse risk factor. It is a myth that smoking cessation during alcohol and drug treatment is harmful. Smoking is a serious addiction that is best treated concurrently with alcohol and other drug treatment.
For me, it's really nice to have an addiction that's like somewhat self-destructive, but like in a really benign way. Like smoking, if I'm like stressed out, I can have a cigarette or whatever, and I think I even kind of like that it's bad for me in some ways. Like I kind of am like, haha, like there's still one thing I can do, and like no one can take it away from me.
I smoke cigarettes because in the beginning when you first smoke cigarettes, you get a buzz, you get high. So I like that. I liked it, that high, I liked it, that buzz, I liked it, the camaraderie I had with other people that I hung with, other friends.
Transgender clients have unique issues, particularly in residential programs. Depending on their phase of transition, their physical bodies may not be congruent with their outward appearance. This may pose challenges for staff in identifying safe and appropriate roommates, providing privacy, and modeling sensitivity in addressing other clients' questions. Many transgender people have difficulty getting access to hormone treatments from reputable medical providers. These issues are the responsibility of staff. The total burden of educating staff and other clients cannot fall on the transgender clients, who must focus on their own recovery.
A lot of my drinking and my drugging was because of my identity, my gender identity. It was easier to drink and drug and fantasize about me being who I was on the inside, because I was always a woman on the inside. And it's really hard to comprehend to some people what that means, but that's what I felt I was and am. So what I did is I drank a lot, and the only way I could go out dressed and have courage to do it was get drunk, get high, go out, go to a gay bar, and, you know, pick up a guy or whatever. Well, you can hide being gay, you can hide being lesbian, you can hide being bisexual. But when you're transgendered and you first transition, I'm sorry, no matter if you're a guy transitioning to female or a female transitioning to male, you're gonna look different and you're gonna be recognized. And I was chastised constantly. When I resigned my position where I worked at the treatment center, that was the hard part. I was no longer going to work and being seen as a substance abuse counselor, outreach counselor, case manager. Now I had no title. I was just Natalie. In recovery, student, which scared the crap out of me. It really did. I didn't realize how much working in the field I did was my identity. Not just being transgendered, but my identity of being a substance abuse counselor. That's what kept me sober, I believed, a lot of the time. And it really scared me. It was the hardest thing. After I resigned, for the first 3 months, I was on edge all the time. I tried to make 3 meetings a week, which was hard because now not only was I outing myself at my job, while people that saw me at Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous recognized me. Now I'm no longer anonymous, even to the population in these meetings, and they were outing me to other people. So not only was I getting the abuse at work, now I was continuing to get it in recovery at these places that are supposed to be safe. Well, they aren't as safe as they say they are. So I had to find my own outlet, and I never showed Natalie sober, ever, 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 ever. So for the first 2 years of my sobriety, I didn't dress at all. Didn't dress, tried not to think about it or nothing. So the first time that I dressed sober was almost 2 years. I was coming up on my 2 years, and it was a week before that I dressed as Natalie. And I sat in the house, and I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I'm going to get drunk, I'm going to get drunk. Because I did. I always thought when I got dressed, I had to get drunk because I had to have courage to go outside. So what I did is I waited till it got really late at night, and then I walked around the block as Natalie. That was a lot of courage for me, sober, to do something like that. Needless to say, I like that. I liked being outside. I didn't stay out there long. It was only around the block and back in the house, but I did it, and I stayed sober.
One major problem with transgenders and placement in a residential treatment facility is they are not honored for the gender they identify with. So you will often have male to female transgenders placed in a male treatment facility. And of course, they're abused, harassed, and unaccepted by the people in the treatment program. They end up leaving.
In conclusion, substance abuse is a chronic relapsing disorder that profoundly impacts LGBT people and communities. Working together, we can create safe and inclusive treatment environments that foster recovery for all of our clients. Treatment is a microcosm of society. LGBT clients feel the same disapproval, discrimination, and harassment they might encounter in the outside world. In treatment, though, one is so vulnerable that disapproval by the group can interfere with or prevent recovery. It is imperative that counselors create a safe and accepting climate for all of their diverse clients.
For those people whose lives I was capable of impacting, the elation and the joy and the gratitude you feel when you help turn someone's life around in the setting of addiction is really difficult to describe in words, because I would see people come in just really at their bottom. They've lost everything, and they're so lonely and isolated, destitute. And to watch them slowly turn their lives around, and even within a month look like somebody you did not recognize anymore, that alone just brings you a lot of positive feeling working in the field.